Very good morning to each one of you. On behalf of the Bangalore Chamber of Industry and Commerce, we welcome each one of you to this session on impact of COVID-19 and way forward. In times like this, we need to stay connected and stay positive. We like to specially thank Mr. K.R. Shekhar, our, our Senior Vice President, for curating this session for the benefit of our members during the lockdown period. Speaker for today's session is Mr. Ravi Vishwanath, who is the Chief Financial Officer at Team Lease Services. He is also on the board of IIJIT Education, Team Lease Staffing Services, and Team Lease Digital. In the past, Mr. Vishwanath occupied the position of the Vice President Finance at Global Symphony Software and Finance Director of Sun Microsystems India. On behalf of the Chamber, we express our sincere thanks to Mr. Ravi Vishwanath for accepting our invitation to address on this important subject. We request all the participants to kindly mute the mic and the webcam options that could help in avoiding background disturbances. Also, for better experience of the meeting, request all the participants to click on the center of the icon, everyone, and then go for who is talking option. No questions will be verbally asked during the session. Please post the questions in the chat box only. No duplication of questions. I may now request Mr. K.R. Shekhar to kindly take it forward, sir.
Thanks, Prithvi. We have Devesh Agarwal also on the call. Hi, Devesh. Welcome, Devesh, to the webinar.
Thank you, and wishing the session a lot of success. And thank you, Ravi, for sharing your Saturday with us.
Thanks, participants. Thanks to all our members for joining this webinar. Ravi is a very dear friend of mine. Me and Ravi goes back to 1997. We have been working closely from 97 onwards, the last 22 years. Ravi, in the post-COVID, I was exchanging a lot of my thoughts with Ravi, and Ravi has been speaking with me. As you're all aware, the Team Lease is one of the staffing organization which has got a significant impact due to COVID. And very often, in management committee meetings and all, we ask how the companies are looking at the employees, how the companies are looking at the cost reduction, how the companies are looking at the payroll, what are the things that's going to happen. We all discuss, we all debate, we all grapple it. And some of us give thoughts from our experience and our perspective. So I thought I could invite Ravi to share his experience and his thoughts post-COVID on how the organizations will look at it. What are the all of us are the challenges. Every organization has got a challenges. Predominantly, it will be some organizations may have a problem on manufacturing. Organization may have a problem on supply chain, sourcing of raw materials and components, your sales supply chain, your employees. And in fact, I was speaking with one of the consumer business, durable manufacturing, and that one of the challenges they're going to face due to social distancing. Their capacity will be down by almost 40 to 50%, even fixed cost will be very high. So that's sort of a challenge. And I was speaking with another technology company yesterday where they said that Check is a delivery organization where they got a problem on how to manage or how to control the employees who are not impacted, or how to make sure that employees are not impacted. So every organization goes through May I request all the participants to keep the phone on mute, please. So every organization goes through challenges, and this is the most, and this sort of what I would call situation we never seen in the past. Probably there would be a flood of 2 days, 3 days of fire. But a pandemic situation of where we're continuously disrupted for a month, and then even after a month you will be operating at 30 to 40% of the capacity, and then it takes time for the companies to operate 100% of capacity. It may take at least 6 months or a year. So the period post-COVID is going to be challenging for most of the organizations. Similarly, when it comes to sector, the real estate sector is already going through the crisis, and post-COVID, we are not sure how the real estate sector is going to get up. Manufacturing industry will always be facing a challenges. Again, post-COVID, how it will be. Travel, leisure industry, and airline industry is going to be significantly impacted. So most of the industries are also getting impacted. And what India has got an advantage is the skill sets, the world's youngest population, and the labor surplus. Under these circumstances, I was discussing with Ravi how to take advantage of this situation and make sure that some of the organizations can come out of the COVID successfully. Of course, the challenging times, nobody can give a prescription, but some thoughts here and there could always help every one of us to manage the challenges arising post-COVID. And that's the reason we have requested Ravi specifically. The structure is that I'll request Ravi to speak for 20 or 25 minutes, and then for another 20 minutes we can interact with Ravi on the questions and answers. Ravi, is it fine for you, Ravi?
Yeah, I'm sure that's okay, Shekhar.
Yeah. All of us, Ravi. Go ahead, Ravi. It's all of us. We are eager to listen to you, Ravi. Thank you, Ravi.
Thank you, and welcome to all the participants of this webinar. Thanks, BCIC, for this opportunity. First of all, I think I must have a disclaimer here to start, but even before I start, because at this stage, if anybody can kind of assess the impact of COVID on either countries or organizations, they'll probably be most in demand, and I haven't had any such demand yet from me. What we can probably do is only try and gaze through the crystal ball and see to what extent this is likely to impact us, how long it's going to last, because this is an unprecedented event which none of us would have thought about. So at best, we can only talk about potential impacts or damages or opportunities that countries or organizations can probably look for. I do interact with a lot of youngsters, and especially the ones who are in class 11, 12. And some of them, when I ask them what do they want to do after they're 12, they used to tell me saying, "Uncle, I'm going to take a gap year after my 12th. I haven't decided. I'm going to take a gap year." The concept of a gap year was totally alien to somebody like me, or to most of us from our generation. I didn't even know what it meant actually, But until now, when I realized that 2020-21 is probably going to be a gap year in all our lives actually, because this is a year when we will probably go back. We will go back to the drawing board, reflect on our experiences, reflect on how things have been, and some of us, and probably most of us, will decide on what the future actually holds for us. I mean, this is probably the best time to look at what the opportunities are, because human beings don't just learn from experiences. Human beings actually learn by reflecting on experiences, and that's what we probably should be doing in times like these. I'm going to talk briefly about the impact of COVID as it is expected to be on some of the countries, on some of the sectors, and maybe talk a bit more about what it's probably going to do to the world of work itself actually, and maybe to some extent I can also talk about what are we doing as a company specifically in times like these, which may be of use to some of you. As we speak today, I think we have over 2.8 million cases, COVID positive cases around the world, close to 195,000 plus fatalities, and there doesn't seem to be any kind of end to this pandemic at this stage, where it's kind of probably taken. I mean, if you look at the heat map, it's probably not left any country untouched by its kind of ruthlessness. So that's where we are. and as expected, most countries have actually come up with multiple ways to tackle it. India has come up with its own way. Most countries have probably chosen what is best for them. Some of them have come up with some massive stimulus packages, which are going. I mean, while it sounds good in the short term, these fiscal packages or stimulus is definitely going to have a large impact on the country borrowings. They might probably have to resort to higher taxation, etc. So the fiscal package announced by India is not that significant, but at the same time, India always plays a wait and watch game when it comes to these kind of matters, as it did in the 2008-2010 timeframe when we had the global financial crisis. So that is going to cause a certain amount of strain on most countries around the world, and countries that are able to come out successfully with minimal damage as would be the bigger beneficiaries. We've also looked at there is going to be massive unemployment around the world. We've seen these numbers creeping up rather sharply over the last couple of weeks, ever since lockdowns, etc., were announced, and this trend will probably continue for a while before it starts kind of coming back or having a recovery. There are some sectors which are likely to be impacted significantly. Sectors like commercial aerospace, air and travel, insurance, oil and gas. We've seen oil and gas already being impacted. Automotive is also going to be impacted. Entertainment is going to be impacted. Your restaurants are going to be impacted. Malls. All these are sectors that are going to be impacted significantly. And there are sectors that are probably also going to be beneficiaries of this. Sectors like education is going to be beneficiary. In the last 1 month, we've probably brought forward online education by about 10 years. We've probably brought forward telemedicine by about 10 years in the last 1 month. And we've also probably brought forward work from home by about 10 years. I did believe that work from home was a reality in the Indian context and that it's going to take a while, but didn't really expect it to take over the way in which it has. And to our surprise, as an organization, to our surprise and to the surprise of many of my colleagues, of my friends in other organizations, the work from home experience has not been very bad. It's been rather pleasant, actually. There is going to also be a fair amount of socio-economic implications, health and wellness, the amounts countries allocate towards health and wellness. Supply chains are going to be impacted. There's going to be geopolitical impacts arising out of this. Some countries are going to be impacted more. India probably can be impacted positively, given the fact that our government actually has done quite a few things right from the start on a very proactive basis. I'm just going to quickly run over what the government has done. I think kudos to them. For the first time, I think we've had a government that recognized the importance of creating a special working group, which they did sometime in the middle of January. They were having the first 5 countries around the world to isolate the virus itself. Our medical experts, we among the first few countries in the world to have travel ban, visa restrictions, and even lockdown at this scale was probably not even thought about by most countries when India announced it. The government also came up with a package. How it's going to play out is something that we need to see over a period of time, because right now, when things are under a lockdown, we're not able to assess the impact of most of these. More importantly, I think there are 2 key things the government. There were 2 key announcements. One is the regulatory announcement with regard to FDI from China. I think it's something which was, they had to send a message across the world that yes, we would not allow our assets to be bought out when they were cheap. I think that's a very, very key message. Lots of people have supported it, and we've also been big supporters of that particular move. The second and the most important one from a global perspective is the government announcing that the 44 labor laws, which were in the process of being reformed, one of which had been done. So for the benefit of of all the members here, we do have 44 labor laws which have not been touched or tinkered for many years now. It's about time that we did it, and the government has been planning to do it for the last few years. Nothing much has happened. So the plan is for these 44 labor laws to be put into 4 labor codes. The 4 codes would be one on wages, one on social security on benefits, third one would be safety, occupational safety and working conditions, and the fourth one would be industrial relations. So this is the simplification of the labor laws that has been talked about for a long time, which has not been done, except the code on wages. The other 3 codes have not been done yet. We do believe that we were expecting that to happen during the course of this year, but there was a positive news in the press last week where we heard that the government was planning to take the ordinance route to get the other 3 codes also notified. I think the government from their perspective is trying to send the signal across to the world that here is an opportunity in India. We've done the tax reforms last year. We have done the labor reforms currently, and there are reforms also being carried out in higher education where they're trying to bring in a higher level of apprenticeships which are required, because as a country, I think we have missed the bus on one of the most key elements of learning, which is learning by doing. India has totally missed the bus on that front. Just to give you some numbers, we do have something called an Apprenticeship Act of 1961, but which was so poorly drafted that we had only 0.01% of our working population on an apprenticeship program. And if you compare that with most other countries, whether it's Germany or most of Europe or Southeast Asian countries or China, Japan, most of these countries have a very large percentage of the working population going through an apprenticeship program before they get into formal employment. This is something that the government has recognized, and they're giving it a lot of importance now and trying to make it linked to higher education itself. These are all welcome moves from the government. So I think essentially the government is trying to send the message across that India is now ready to take on a role as an alternative manufacturing location for those countries or for those corporates who are trying to look at alternatives other than China, because most other countries have limitations in terms of capacity. India does not have it. At this stage, we can still become, I don't think India can replace China to be in terms of manufacturing contribution to the GDP. But even if India can take its current manufacturing percentage from 10 to about 20%, I think we would have done a fantastic job. So that's as far as the signals are concerned from the government. I think the government is also watching and monitoring the situation closely, and I'll not talk much about it right now. There are certain areas that will get impacted probably, like we said, consequent to the work from home. One of the things that will probably get impacted is commercial real estate space, who for a long time have probably had it really good. I think most commercial real estate people would probably agree that they have not taken the same kind of risk as what a businessman takes in their business. So that will get questioned, and from this, with this work from home kind of taking precedence now, and most real estate transactions of leases, etc., are today being renegotiated with the landlords. That's also one of the things that companies are doing to ensure that they do survive. As Warren Buffett said, you've got to survive first to succeed, and these are really times that will test your survival instincts. Actually, there are, like I said, e-learning and telemedicine have actually been advanced by actually about 10 years. Everybody's been talking about e-learning, but nobody probably knew how to get it right. But it's now, we see, right up to primary schools and high schools, resorting to e-learning and online education, and that is here to stay. It will get tweaked over time, but like in the case of most things in India, it's going to be baptism by fire for us, where we just jump into it and then we learn whatever needs to be done to kind of fine tune it. And that's what we've done with most of our reforms actually. We've actually done these most reforms only when we've had a gun put to our head and not before that. And even now, the situation is not going to be any different. Now coming to specifically, coming to enterprises, I think most of us are today, we do agree that companies without debt are probably in a better position than companies who have some amount of debt on their balance sheet. Companies who have very limited areas to focus on are probably better than companies that have multiple business lines to look at. Basically capital allocation is going to become a challenge. So as a company, what we've been at least doing as a company is trying to see where we can. One, of course, all plans have become useless. As Eisenhower said, plans are useless, but the process of planning is indispensable. So, and that's exactly what all of us have been doing. We've been working on plans on a daily basis. We've been working on daily plans, weekly plans. Right now, monthly plans are probably more important than quarterly and yearly plans. So we've been trying to look at, fundamentally, we've been trying to assess the impact of revenues. More importantly, your revenues are going to determine what kind of cost that we can incur. We've again been looking at discretionary spends have all been put away. We have looked at people costs, trying to rationalize people costs, trying to see how best to convert fixed into variable. We've been talking about and trying to do some of those. We've been trying to assess cash flows. We've been in touch with our bankers, trying to secure additional lines of credit. These are difficult times, but it's important that we stay in touch with our bankers and talk to them, as often as we can, give them that level of comfort that everything is okay. And of course, past track record of the bankers do matter in times like these. So we have been trying to do all of these. Cash flow management plays a very important role. I think it's also important for somebody like us to look at, all those of us who have long-term projects, to try and see how much of it could be deferred, because as of now, short-term survival is probably more important than looking at kind of long-term goals. So those are those are some of the key things that actually we've been doing as a company. And then coming to work from home itself, I think as of now, most mature companies have begun looking at their people supply chains very differently. This is an area that I'll probably spend some time on, which is essentially saying that until a few years back, all what we did was, when we started a business or any time thereafter, was say how many people did we need, how many full-time employees, and that's about it. That's where the conversation ended. Where are we going to hire them from, and so on and so forth. Those kind of discussions are not going to happen going forward. I think you're going to be having a lot more deeper discussions around people in terms of what's the total kind of people, what functional kind of people are we going to need, how many of them are going to be really full-time employees, how many of them are going to be apprentices, how many of them are whom I can tap into anytime into the future, how many are going to be temporary or contract workers, because in times like these, people do realize the importance of having contract employees is where you're able to scale up and scale it down. And more importantly, how many people are going to be having as a work from home employee. How the work from home employee situation is going to kind of play is something we don't have much of a clue right now, but we do know that work from home is here to stay. How it's going to kind of play out is something, it will evolve over the next year and a half, 2 years. It will evolve for sure. Companies are also beginning to think about outsourcing of certain functional areas. It could be within the finance function itself. It could be certain other areas which could be outsourced. India is a services economy. And so I think a work from home situation kind of actually fits in very well with our storyline. The only thing that we haven't probably learned or will probably have to learn over time is that work from home needs a certain kind of maturity and discipline, which we probably do not have at this stage. But like I said, India, I mean, everything in India is baptism by fire. We've been thrown into it, and we will probably learn it as we go along the way. There could be a lot of trainings that companies would do for employees to work from home. So I think net, I think India, I mean, from an Indian context, I think the sooner India, I mean, we've done reasonably well as far as the pandemic is concerned in terms of controlling it so far. If India can come out of the pandemic relatively better compared to most of the global kind of corporate, I mean, relative to most of the other countries, I think we will see a fair amount of capital flow coming back into India. I mean, which is where I think the government also realizes that we can't keep the lockdowns on forever. We do see relaxations happening. I was just talking to a fund manager yesterday about the lockdowns itself. The key to lockdowns is not about when you lock a country down. The key is how do you open it up, because that's going to be the challenge. And a perfect example would be it's like buying stocks. It's not about when you buy the stocks that is important. It's about when you sell it, which actually makes a difference. How you sell it, when you sell it, is what makes a difference. I think that's exactly what's going to happen with the lockdown as well. How are we going to manage the lockdown? We have seen some kind of lifting of some measure, I mean, of the lockdown to some extent in Karnataka, because Karnataka is one of those states which has done relatively well compared to others. So maybe Karnataka might prove to be the template for other states to follow. We don't know yet. But overall, I mean, this is a situation where, I'm probably as clueless as most of you are. And actually, if not anything, this particular situation has led us all to be more humble than we've all ever been before. And that's actually a good thing. We're probably all looking at, at things very, very differently today. And yeah, I mean, so I'll probably stop with this. And I don't know how much time I've taken. I think I've taken just about the right time. I'll probably stop here right now and open the floor for questions.
Ravi, if I may just interrupt, Mr. Baid and Mr. Shankar Yirannan, can you please switch off your cameras? Otherwise, they are just simply occupying the real estate of the screen. Yes, Mr. Shankar, you can keep flipping the paper back and forth. You need to switch off your camera.
Okay, we are asking questions. Anybody has got any questions?
Yeah,
please feel free to ask. Yeah, Ravi.
There was one thing that I forgot to mention, which I'll just quickly touch upon.
Please go ahead.
I mean, this work from home has helped us believe that everything can be done from home. There's no problems about that. But I think we will have to, as managements and as senior leaders in corporations, I think we will have to now see how these backend systems need to be configured for a work from home situation. I think most of us today have worked on huge enterprise ERP platforms at the backend, and probably a time has now come to try and see how we could probably modularize it or make it smaller, make it lighter, make it thinner, so that a work from home experience can be enhanced for employees when they do work from home. Yeah.
Ravi, anybody else got any questions? Ravi, may I ask the first question, Ravi, to you?
Yeah, go ahead, Shekhar. Yeah.
You talked about the two important aspects, education, online education, and second important aspect from a corporate perspective about the real estate.
Yeah.
Where do you see these two things in the next 2 years, Ravi? Because one of the challenges for the economy, the real estate is already in a state of shock, still has not recovered pre-COVID. Now, COVID has created much more stress on the real estate. So where do you see these two, Ravi, the online education plus real estate in the next 2 years? Just your guess and what's your thought on that?
I think online education will take off over the next 2 years. We have been pushing the government to liberalize certain conditions and rules around online education. The government has been differing on this front. We have seen more registrations on Coursera and Udemy and all the overseas platforms compared to the domestic ones. I think it's about time that the government is now today taking it seriously, and it's absolutely essential that we probably get this up and running right now, because I don't think the world will be normal for at least about 18 months. This virus is not going to go away, until such time a vaccine comes out, which is a good year to 15 months away. And even after the vaccine comes out, to manufacture billions of doses to ensure everybody gets it is also going to take some time. So until then, the virus is going to rear its ugly head every now and then, here and there, and you're going to be seeing some localized lockdowns across multiple places. And so the only option available under such circumstances is an online education platform or a tool that will actually help schools continue with whatever they're doing. So online education is here to stay. So commercial real estate, I do agree. Real estate as a sector has been quite impacted for a while now, but commercial was not so as badly impacted as residential was. But right now, I think commercial would also be impacted for a while. People have been resorting to the usage. To the force majeure clause under lease agreements to see whether they could invoke it and try and get better terms out. I'm not sure how much of it you will be successful with that, but because it all depends on the language used in the kind of agreement, and nobody probably ever gave any thought to a force majeure clause in a lease deed, because one thought that would never be invoked. So that's where we are. But we will have to be. There would have to be some negotiations with the real estate people, and I think that industry is going to be under stress for a little longer than the others, Shekhar.
Morning,
Ravi,
Shekhar.
this is Adil Kumar. I have a question for you. What is your message for MSMEs and startups? They seem to be completely lost and they just don't know what to do. And I'm not seeing any major measures from government also to help them. What is your message?
Okay. See, there's a very simple definition of, entrepreneurship is actually the art of staying alive long enough to get lucky. Okay. That's the definition of an entrepreneurship. How do you stay long alive? Then how do you stay long enough? You stay long enough by being frugal with capital. So I think the message is try and cut costs as much as you can to stay alive long enough, actually. That's the only way out. Capital flow has not dried up completely. Valuations have been irrational. Valuations have actually come down. The kind of irrational valuations that we saw some time back, those actually have taken a beating for some time now. Ever since the WeWork IPO got pulled back, and ever since Uber, etc., took a hit on their valuations, I think the valuations overall has actually been coming down. So, for good ideas, there is still money available, though not at the crazy kind of valuations that one saw. I'm not sure if the government has done enough for the MSME sector. Although the government is trying their best, the government's also hands are tied, because we've not had a great economy for the last couple of years. So the government's own cash flows and fund flow positions is not in a very, very healthy spot right now for them to really open the purse strings and say, okay, go ahead. These are stressful times for the MSME sector. There are some COVID-related schemes that have been launched. I think SBI, there's some COVID-related schemes that have been launched. I personally haven't really had a chance to go through them, but the best bet is to just talk to the existing bankers and just stay afloat right now, Alan.
Ravi, my name is
Ravi.
Ravindra.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question, Manohar, here, please?
Yeah, go ahead, Manohar.
Okay, you just now addressed the concerns of the startups. I'm co-founder and mentor of 2 startups. We were doing well until about 4 months back. we were well in the sense that we were on track. All our milestones we were able to meet. Then by the end of May, we were expecting, rather it was almost all the due diligence was done for the next tranche of investment. Now we had kept quite a few resources, which is a high-end resource on the bench to recruit them by the end of this month. Now everything has gone to doldrum. Our revenues have been stopped for the last 2 months. Now we are stuck. It's not that we can keep these people on the bench all the time. They may not get so many opportunities to go out also. At the same time, they will have options. Our next business plan is dependent on some of these critical resources. We are finding ways, how do we keep the interest of these people going forward, number one. Two, our investment interest has really diluted, and a good chunk that was to come, now we don't know where we are going to do. We have significantly substantial overheads that are going in terms of rent and our other facilities, the subscriptions and the present salary. Although people are working from home, but not all of them are required to work from home. Some of them were physically there. They had to visit the customers. The customers are closed. Now, what do we do with those staff? We are humanistic. We have been paying full salary so far, and that forms about 15 to 20% of our the resource as such. On the marketing side, it is about 45%. So now we are stuck. We don't see what all of us are doing our brainstorming. How do you go about it? What do we do? Kind of situations. And promoters are not taking a single pie for the last one year, but we're all working as volunteers and then as owners. Now way forward is a question. I'm sure this question would have come from many others. You may not have a ready answer to give me, but this is something that I'm sharing as a concern. Individually, we all are able to sustain a little because we have other alternatives which we are also running. Now it doesn't happen with everybody. Thank you. You may answer that, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly a very difficult question to answer because I do understand the pain that the company must be going through. The government has the government has easily said, please don't cut employees' salaries during the lockdown period. And that has been challenged by a lot of organizations in the Supreme Court, saying that how could the government say that on one side without us having revenues on the other side? So companies have been looking at, like I said, the art of entrepreneurship is the art of staying alive long enough to get lucky. So you will have to ensure that whatever rupee that you've got is actually stretched to the maximum possible extent, even if it means giving up your real estate, allowing people to work from home. Marketing spends is something that you'll have to evaluate whether it's truly worth spending money on marketing. But then in times like these, because you'll only be you'll only be actually you'll only be spending money without adequate returns. So I'm not sure whether marketing spends will really give you a return on investment in times like these. Whereas the best thing would be to go back to the drawing board, reevaluate your plans, get people to maybe sacrifice some part of their salaries and offer them stocks instead, because ESOPs and your stock appreciation rights or other kind of stock plans have become a lot more attractive in times like these when valuations have actually dropped, because they do know that at some stage this too will pass and things will start getting back to normal. So you'll have to be alive long enough till when the economic kind of uptick happens. How is it going to happen? People expect that the recovery would probably be V-shaped in most developed economies. It could be U-shaped in some, or it could take the shape of a bathtub in some, actually, where you have an elongated kind of bottom and then it starts going up after that. It's what we call the bathtub kind of a recovery. So we don't know what kind of recovery India is poised for, because a lot of it depends on how quickly we are able to come. How quickly we are able to come out of the current situation. So given no amount of modeling will work here, because we've tried. There's nothing. These are unprecedented times, and I don't think anybody has an answer to this kind of to the current situation other than you. And you will have to see how best you can last your existing monies to actually help you tide over this time right now.
Thank you for the suggestion. There's one thing that you mentioned about the infra or the real estate. Now, the problem is, if it is only real estate, we can give up and work from home. But we have made investments into technology infra in that premises. So it's not easy to give up also, because tomorrow, if you want to go back, you can't again bring back that. And we have been talking to the owner to reduce the rental component and all that. He's not too willing. He says, if that is so, you close it, kind of thing. No, we are negotiating. We are using our skill of negotiation there. But then, thanks a lot for your interventions. If there is anything more, I welcome.
Please.
Thanks, Manohar. Thank you. Anybody else got questions?
Good afternoon, Mr. Ravi. This is Parshuraman. Can I ask a question?
Sure, sir.
Thanks a lot for the wonderful insight of the macro perspectives. See, first question is, you talked about China. See, the interesting thing is also an aging population. See, China most likely to enter into the service sector also because of the aging population. So that opportunity is also India is going to enjoy. So India is not only a market India, but a factory India, not only for domestic consumption, for the rest of the world. So that is one perspective. What do you think about it? And second perspective is the infrastructure. Like today, because of the social distancing, even people would love to go by their own vehicles, not to share it with others. But for a country like India, the infrastructure is a big challenge. So one side, this balancing act. So with this, will it propel the infrastructure enhancement in India? And will it be a new opportunity? What do you think about it?
As it is, I think the government was trying to prop up the infrastructure sector to boost the economy, actually, because it's the government spending that can really help more than the private enterprises, especially in times like these. So we will have to wait and see how the government reacts to some of the infra spending, because they will have to start the process, which will have to be then carried forward by the others. So I completely understand social distancing norms will necessitate the use of own transportation as opposed to public transportation. But again, the government is also asking companies today to justify why somebody needs to work in the office when if the same kind of work can actually be carried out from homes. So that is something that is being questioned by the government.
I'm talking about largely the manufacturing industries where people's physical presence is required. Of course, IT, BT, and service sectors can operate from home, but still a larger chunk, the manufacturing industries, which contribute to almost 15% of the GDP, and it is likely to be a big contributor going forward.
Yeah.
And of course, I understand. And what do you think about China market coming to India progressively? See, given this situation, even China's image in the global arena is not so good, given the current situation, and many countries have decided to relocate their businesses, including Japan. So India is a possible destination. So I think it's a great opportunity for India to rebound after this COVID. So I think, what do you think about that?
I completely agree with you. My own view is that while China gave the world the virus, I think India has been giving the world the medicine, actually, is how I look at it. And so I'm sure that the noble deed will not go unnoticed by global leaders. And so, I mean, so definitely to a large extent, this is a great opportunity for India. And I'm sure the authorities will milk it. I mean, they will not let this opportunity go by. In fact, I would like to mention that even when India, exported hydroxychloroquine to the US, India got back something in return. It is not as if it was just a one-way thing that happened. India got back something more in return from the US for giving the HCQ in times like these. So I'm sure the authorities do know what they are. What is ahead of them, and I'm sure they will probably take the right decision. And it is a great opportunity for both for manufacturing.
Hi, Ravi.
Yeah.
This is Jagdish Mittur, your friend Ravi's brother. How are you?
Yes, I'm good. I'm good, Jagdish. How are you doing?
All right.
Yeah.
I'm fine. Thank you. Sorry I missed out your earlier presentations, but enjoying your question and answer session. One of the things that I keep getting asked is by young people is that, sir, is there a scope in biotechnology? Is there scope in biological sciences, life sciences? Now, COVID-19, I don't know if I should thank COVID-19. It has raised huge opportunities for people to pursue their careers in science, because I have one belief, and I think you also believe, that many of these problems come from biological sciences, but also we should realize that there are answers, hidden answers in biological sciences also. For example, vaccine, for example, diagnostic kits and PCR kits and things like that. What I'm surprised is that not enough emphasis is being placed by the authorities on further promoting research by investment and other supports in biological sciences. So I'm wondering if leading economists like yourself, and through your organizations, through your societies, can make a very, very strong suggestion to the government, not just for COVID-19, but for future pandemics, future biological problems, to please invest more and more and more in this sector, so that we are well ahead of the game in case the next pandemic or some other disease is coming by. You are well prepared. So economists like you are suffering because India is going down economy, world is going down economy. So my request to you, Ravi, is that please kindly get together with other leading economists and submit a white paper in such a way that government cannot ignore.
Jagdish, it couldn't be more apt than what you've said right now. I mean, actually what you said is very, very appropriate. I think there is going to be, if anything at all, I think this pandemic is going to create a very new world post this, and where I think people, the amount of money that's going to be spent on healthcare and on research on etc. is going to be a lot more compared to what we've been doing. I think we've just been scratching the surface. All of us have been killing ourselves all these years, seeing that we've been doing some qualitative stuff, but it looks like we've all been beaten black and blue right now. So yes, I mean, definitely at the relevant places we will take it up, and I must say that over the last couple of years itself, the attraction of pure sciences to students in class 11 and 12 is a lot more than what it used to be about 10 years ago. So that is a very healthy sign, and I think if that trend continues, I'm sure the field of biotechnology will probably attract a lot more minds and investors and actually candidates into it.
Thanks, Ravi. Thanks for taking this forward. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have one suggestion to Devesh, our president. President, thanks, congratulations on organizing these online shows. Very useful. One suggestion I have is, when we meet physically, we meet people one-to-one and we exchange cards, and we know if you have a point, if you have a suggestion, we interact. Now, is it possible for the chamber to share who all have participated so that we can pick and choose and then continue our conversation with them?
I am not sure, Manohar. Firstly, the credit goes to Mr. Shekhar and Mr. Ravi Vishwanath for organizing and accepting the invitation. The president in this case is not deserving of the credit. Credit should
certainly
definitely
we give them all the credit through you. Yeah, sure.
But the three of us are working like a team. Sorry, Ravi borrowed a pun from your company's name, but definitely we will look into it and we will try. If I may ask a question of you, Ravi, you were alluding to the 2008 slowdown, the global financial crisis, and how India took some time to react. At that time, if you recall, India was fairly insulated from the world banking. The banking systems were not as open. And I also remember that the Indian economy had a lot more headroom for deficit spending and all that. And if you see over the last about 5-7 years, the headroom has progressively shrunk. And also, of course, we are seeing the economy has slowed down. How do you see the maneuvering room now that the FM and PM have got as compared to 12 years ago, or even 10 years ago? Number one. Number two, Mr. Parasuraman alluded to infrastructure. I also find one of the key components, having lived and worked in Singapore for 7 years and then lived in the United States for 20, traveled extensively in East Asia and Southeast Asia, that by and large, government officers in those countries have a mindset of, okay, let us try and solve the problem and speed things up. In India, somehow, still within especially things like customs and excise and these kinds of departments, the thought process is still how can I throw a stone so that it results in some benefit to me personally. So this is what I would call as a sort of a mental infrastructure, not really the physical infrastructure. So if you can just allude to this also, 2 points. One is the headroom, and one is improving what I would call the mental infrastructure of the administration of the country.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, let me take the first question, which is, the comparison between 2008 and to the current situation. 2008, we had, India was coming off some few good growth years. There was some headroom available. We had a great central banker in Mr. Y.V. Reddy, who did not budge when, who took some fantastic steps during the crisis. Unlike most countries, India did not, go on to print currency because that is something that actually helped India over the longer term, because all the excess currency or excess money that countries printed around the world has to find its place and kind of flowed into India at some point of time. So India was actually a beneficiary even at, even in those days. But under the current situation, I think the headroom for the government is is just not there, because we're coming off a couple of bad years for the Indian economy itself. The only headroom that the government seems to have at this point of time is the oil price, which is actually low. And of course, consumption is also low, so that really shouldn't make much of an impact. But once the economy picks up, we don't expect oil to really go up to the level that what it was earlier. So that should provide some kind of cushion for the government. And on the economic front, I think honestly, we found the government actually lacking, because whether it is on the finance ministry or the RBI, although the RBI has taken a bunch of measures over the last month in terms of coming up and opening it up, creating more liquidity in the system and so on. The benefit, so we've not been able to assess the impact of that yet with the lockdown in place. So we will have to wait and see once the lockdown gets lifted, maybe by end of May or by about the middle of June. We would be in a better position to understand the impact of what the government has done. Is it really enough? Is it not enough? Is something that we will know only at that point of time. So that's so the government is walking a tightrope, and the government is actually, they have their hands tied at this point. I think that we will have to give them credit for what they have done and just wait and watch in terms of what further they'll come up with. On the second aspect of, the infrastructure with regard to the government officials, etc. There's not much that the government, I think at the center, they do understand that certain things need to be curbed. They are moving in the direction of faceless assessments, faceless filings, your what we call PPC, your paperless, presenceless, cashless kind of filings and so on. They've not made much headway, other than in the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, where every single filing today in the MCA is done online and in an electronic fashion. I don't think much headway has been made under other laws. To some extent, GST, to some extent, direct taxes, they've done it. They are moving in that direction, but they have a long way to go. Once the labor reforms get done, maybe to some extent there would be a lot of paperless versus cashless kind of filings that will happen under the new labor codes. So we'll have to wait and see how that pans out, Devesh. Other than that, we'll have to only hope and pray that over time some of these things get corrected.
Thank you so much. And what I was observing is that government intervention till now has primarily been monetary, very little in terms of actual what I would call, say, fiscal. But of course, one of the suggestions I think almost all chambers made, but BCIC was one of the first, was to utilize the ESI fund to pay workers, so that puts money. There's a lot of idle cash lying in government coffers, which I think can be put to good use. What do you see are some of the steps that the government absolutely must take, say, within the next 30 days to prevent us going over the edge?
I think the next 30 days would be to ensure some level of comfort for the unorganized sector workers. So the organized sector workers form a very small fraction of the total system. And that is not really a cause for concern. While there may be some cuts in salaries here and there, they are not really worse off compared to the unorganized sector, which almost, we have almost about 90+% of the total employment in the kind of unorganized sector, and those people need to be taken care of. I would say, the government brought in this lockdown all of a sudden, which has ensured that people, these migrant workers, etc., have not been able to move here. They will have to be provided for, they will have to be adequately taken care of. This will have to be done only through their employers, because the government has been doing their bit through this direct benefit transfers into employees' accounts. That is happening today. So I think the immediate would be to take care of the unorganized sector employees over the next 30 days, because they would play a very important role in the economy coming back up once things actually turn around, actually.
Shekhar, over to you. Please take the meeting forward. And thank you, Ravi.
3 questions to Ravi, please. Another 2 more minutes. We can have 1 more question from anybody here before. Okay. Ravi, before we conclude, you spoke more about the labor code and the labor law, the proposed code. There are some sort of views around the labor code that it's not so helpful. So I just wanted to check up with you, because I know we are in the forefront on some of the matters on the labor law code, particularly for the staffing industry. So what's your thought on the labor law code, and how do you think the labor law code can help the corporates, organization, the post-COVID situation, Ravi? What's your thought, Ravi?
See, I'll tell you, the labor law reforms have been waiting to happen for, God knows, for maybe more than 25 years now. And it's about time that they got it started. The government was keen to get it done in 2016, and still 4 years later, and we're still talking about it. It will actually send the right signals across the world, Shekhar. More than anything else, it will send the right signals across the world from an ease of doing business perspective, because that's an area which is a cause for concern for quite a few corporates and establishments outside of India. And not to talk about even within the country, the high level of informality that we have in our country, or the unorganized sector, is largely on account of the 44 labor laws not being in sync with each other. So better than, I would say, we don't wait for all the lights to turn green before we leave home. We just have to get these 4 labor codes out out. I don't think they'll be perfect. They will have a lot of anomalies in them. Which will need to be actually tackled on an ongoing basis. But the first step is to get these 4 labor codes out, and that will then send the right signals to people that yes, the government is moving in the direction of formalizing the economy, of making it easy for companies to start operating, and so on and so forth. I think that messaging is key, which has been pending for a long time now.
Thank you, Ravi. Thanks. If nobody
Shekhar, can I have a last question? Shekhar,
please.
Shekhar, can I have a last question?
Yeah, please.
Thanks a lot, Shekhar. So Ravi, last question. Sorry. What do you think about equity markets? Is it the right time to invest, or is it bottomed? Or of course, it's $1 billion question. But from your personal perspective, what do you think?
I don't
As an
know.
economist.
So actually, I mean, I would not like, I don't know whether to say yes or no, but definitely markets have bottomed out. Markets if you do see some corrections happening here and there. Valuations are probably more rational today than what they were a couple of months ago or even a year ago. But I don't know whether it's the right time because they were, even when the markets were high, people were buying, right? So for them, it was the right time. So I don't know. I can't answer that question right now. But I do believe that markets have actually bottomed, have kind of, I mean, these are at attractive levels is what I would say.
It's a very kind of a safe levels to buy. That's what you're trying to say.
Valuations are at attractive levels right now. I wouldn't say whether it's, I mean, it may be attractive is a very relative term. What may be attractive to me may not be attractive to you. So markets are at attractive levels right now. So that's how one has to look at it.
People say the bounce back would be much faster than the deterioration itself.
I mean, so it's like, so these are really like a crystal ball gazing, and I don't think anybody really knows when that will happen, how it will happen.
True.
Like I said, is it going to be a V-shaped recovery? Is it going to be a U-shaped recovery? Or is it going to be a bathtub-shaped recovery? We don't know yet, actually. And a lot depends on how we are able to tackle the current situation of flattening the curve and making it better for people to start moving around and getting some kind of normalcy back into our lives, actually.
That's right. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Ravi. Thank you so much, Ravi, for speaking to us.
Thank you.
On behalf of all my members here and Bangalore Chamber of Industry and Commerce, I thank you, Ravi, and I personally thank Yasif, my dear friend. And we'll be in touch with you, Ravi, particularly on a matter related to the labor law and the labor law course. We'll definitely take inputs from you because I know very well that you are at the forefront of some of the legislation, the labor law. So definitely, we'll be in touch with you, Ravi. Thank you, Ravi. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, bye.
Thank you, participants, for joining.
Thanks a lot, Ravi Mishra. Thanks, Shekhar. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Shekhar. Fantastic program. Thank you, Ravi. Thank you so kindly on behalf of the chamber.
Thanks, Devesh. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.